Greetings! Now, typically I make a lot of videos on this channel about Dungeons and Dragons, but for some reason, now that we're all quarantined into our house with the coronavirus, most of my Dungeons and Dragons games seem to have broken up for the time being. And yeah, I know we can schedule all that stuff and do it over Discord or other internet venues, but everybody seems to be kind of tied up in the things that they're doing right now. So, since I'm not playing Dungeons and Dragons, I thought I would do something a little bit different this time. I want to write a video game. But how am I going to go about doing that? So in this video, I'm going to discuss the weapons of war. Which tools am I going to use to design and build my very own video game? Now have a peek at this sweet animation that I made in Blender to demonstrate my chops as far as making video games. My name is Brian Carey, and I am the Savvy Barbarian. Okay, so like I said, I am going to build a video game. Now, the tools for the trade that I'm going to use, I need to pick a set of software that I can use to build a video game. And so that's what this video is going to be all about. We're going to discuss what tools am I going to use to build this video game. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is the game engine. So I'm going to build a game from scratch, but not from scratch, right? So say you have a character and he jumps up into the air and you want him to fall to the ground again. You can code all that, but a game engine has already built the physics engine that makes him jump so high and fall at a reasonable speed. The game engine provides more than just a physics engine, though. The game engine provides a place where you can put all your 3D assets. It's where you put all your code, and it helps you to compile to the final version. So you have a way to export it to, is it to iOS, is it to Linux, is it to a legacy system, is it to Mac OS? Where are you going to put this? So the game engine does a whole lot of neat things for you, so you spend more time doing the creative work than you do coding how gravity works, or draw depth, or the field of view of your camera, or how to figure out how fog and translucency and bloom and God rays and stuff that, yeah, you might like to use all those things, but do you really want to build those from scratch? I know that I don't. So, game engine. So the 800-pound gorilla in the game engine space is the Unity game engine. Now, I would be willing to wager that you have played a game on Unity, whether you know you have or not. They are big. So probably about 60%, 50 or 60% of all mobile games now have been developed using the Unity game engine. They are just everywhere, and they do make some buttery, smooth, fine-looking games on there. However, you're an indie developer, or you probably wouldn't be watching this video, and you don't have a team of 30 or 50 or 100 guys to do all the coding and wrench all the performance out of that engine and learn all the tricks and nuances and get it to just behave exactly the way you want. You want some results, and you want them fast. So part of that, and we'll talk about a couple of things. First thing I want to talk about is the programming language. Now, Unity has actually been stripping programming languages out of their game engine. At this point, they support C#. That's what they support. If you're going to use Unity, you're going to learn C#. It's based on C++. C# was made around 20 years ago. I want to say that was made around the year 2000, and it was developed by Microsoft. And it's okay. It's better than C++, which it was derived from. C++ is horrible. I think that's about 1985, roughly. That's getting to be a 35-year-old language, and it's a little rough by today's standards. Unity also has a visual programming language where they're like, look, you won't need to type any code. It's kind of it feels like prototype right now. It's not that great, but I tell you, visual programming sounds great, and it's really good for kids. Like, by all means, if you got kids, give them Scratch, and they'll learn the ideas of loops and if-thens and for loops and variables and all that stuff. But once you start to get the concept of how that works, it's a whole lot easier to type if on a keyboard, and it's a whole lot faster than going through the grid block and trying to find the if and drag it out into the right place. And like, I can't comprehend that visual programming will ever really replace typing some code in, because once you learn it, it's so much faster. And the stuff that Unity has, their visual programming language, I don't think it's not very nice, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to admit at this point that I am a huge free open source software guy. I've been using Linux for like 20 years as my primary desktop, and been using it on servers for companies, and it's fantastic. So I like it. There's very little in the ways of viruses, and some of you guys will be like, oh no, another Linux guy. But like, you guys are the minority. You're only the 5%. Maybe, but you're probably using Linux whether you know it or not. Have you ever connected to the internet? You're using Linux. You ever use Netflix? Guess what kind of operating system all those movies are stored on? You're getting streamed from Linux. Amazon? Guess what all their systems are? Linux. How about Google Stadia? All the games that are coming out on Google Stadia, all of them are running on Linux in the background. All of Google, in fact, they don't even allow legacy systems in their buildings at this point. They run all Linux. Your Android phone, guess what? That's running a Linux kernel. Biggest operating system in the world is running a Linux kernel. I believe at this point all the virtual reality headsets also run a small Linux kernel in the background for their intelligence. And if you actually look at programmers, the numbers are a lot different than you think. So according to a Stack Overflow survey, 32.9% of the programmers are using Linux desktop. 69.6% of the users say that Linux is their most loved platform. So it's a lot bigger deal than you think. So as I approach this from a free open source software perspective, I've done my homework, and I think this is a great platform. I would recommend you use it. Use Debian, use Ubuntu, use whatever you like. There's actually friendly competition, so it's not like all your eggs are in one basket. Now, I told you all that to tell you this. Unity's support of Linux is, I would say, kind of experimental. They started on Mac OS, and then from there they branched out to legacy systems. So they, at this point, support almost everything that you can port to. They will port to iOS, Android, web, PlayStation, Xbox. Like I said, they're the default for the Nintendo Switch, and they run about half the mobile games on the market right now. Unity also has an asset store. This is maybe good, this is maybe bad. It feels like, so you as a developer, you could develop assets and sell them on the asset store, but most of the people get on the asset store and buy things. So it's almost like this game engine is designed to give you clickbait to get you to buy more things. So even though Unity is got free and paid versions, it's still, they're going to get in your pocket if your game becomes very popular. I think you've got to sell, goodness, I think it's like $100,000 worth of product before you start to have to pay them money, but they will get in your pocket if you start to make a living at this thing. If you don't mind learning C# and diving into a pretty complicated engine, Unity might be a good choice for you. It is not really free and is not open source by the classical defined terms of that. And so I'm going to pass. In second place, as we continue to talk about game engines, would be the Unreal Engine. Now this one supports C++. Like I said, that's about a 35-year-old language. And I think C++ is pretty ugly. Like, that's really showing its age. You're going to put in a lot of magic brackets and a lot of, I mean, it's really, I think it's squirrely. Now, if you program in C++ and you're already good at it, then hey man, more power to you. But I don't like it. And it's not very friendly for new people either. And it's not very easy compared to something like Python, which is very easy for new users to learn and get up to speed with. Now, Unreal also has a visual programming language. They call theirs Blueprints. And actually, that's, of all the ones that I've seen, that's pretty nice. Their Blueprints thing, they're going down a good road there. Like, if there's any chance that visual programming, like not typing code, it's like dragging and dropping blocks and dragging noodles between the inputs and outputs and that sort of thing. Like, if there's any If that's going to work, Blueprints is looking pretty nice. That's probably the best looking thing as far as visual programming I've seen. Now they support all the major platforms just like Unity does, Xbox, Switch, iOS, legacy systems, Linux, and so on and so on. But if you're going to develop something and you're on legacy or Mac, you're in decent shape. It's supported. If you're on Linux, it's a little iffy. Here, have a peek at this. So this is the documentation page from the Unreal Engine. And as you can see, I'm in the Linux Quick Start, and it says, currently we don't supply a binary installer of Unreal 4 for Linux users. The good news is that you can compile a binary of Unreal Engine from the same source code that we use. I have to compile this from source? Are you kidding? Can you imagine making Mac OS users compile this thing from source? They'd go out of their minds. I mean, even as a Linux user, I'm really used to the software store. There's like 50, 60,000 programs out there, and I click install, and then a little progress bar goes across, and then I click launch. 2 buttons, and I'm running the software. That's what I'm used to. Now, this is what I got to do if I'm going to install this Unreal Engine for Linux. I've got to register for an account, agree to some squirrely end user license agreement that who knows what is in there. Has anybody ever read an end user license agreement? I got to set up a Git account. Maybe you already got a Git account, but now you got to learn Git. And then you've got to get authorized for Epic Games, and then you've got to download this and clone their repository onto your desktop, and then you've got to I don't know. Now there's commands and things where I've got to type stuff, set up, make, generate. I've got to build. I've got to download their source code and make it myself. I mean, for real? How do you not have a binary? Everybody else, there's a deb file or an RPM or something where this is pretty easy, guys. It's not that bad. You do this for a living. You can make Unreal Engine and you can't figure out how to compile a bit of software. And besides that, Unreal seems pretty sketchy to me. I mean, they've got some neat games, Gears of War and Fortnite and stuff. They do, and they've got the digital storefront where they're trying to compete a little bit with Valve's Steam. And okay, but they're half owned by some Chinese corporations, and that is a big old red flag. Who knows what's going to happen to your intellectual property or what rights are going to change at some point in the future. And Unreal's getting into your pocket pretty quick. So they want 5% after the first $3,000. And maybe that sounds acceptable to you, but think about, you put together a game and you sell it for 30 bucks. After your 99th sale, you're paying them money. And that's going to add up. And eventually you're going to get a little resentful of it. Maybe not. I'm just saying, free and open source software has its place. The weapon I'm going to choose, I believe, is the Godot Engine. At godotengine.org, they have got a free open source software license of this engine. It's got a full 2D engine and a full 3D physics engine. And it programs in something called GDScript, which is practically identical to Python. Just the finest little changes, like you have to type func in front of functions, which you don't have to type in Python. I think you have to put var in front of your variables, which I don't think you have to do in front of Python. So there's wee little tweaks, but as far as strict indentation and putting things together, Python has got to be the easiest programming language I have ever tripped across. And I get to code in Python. That's fantastic news. Now, if you still want to code in C#, you can. Godot allows you to code in C#. So if we go to Godot's documents page, you can see every single bit of their code snippets that they show you. They show it to you in GDScript, and if you click on C#, they show you the exact equivalent in C#. So you can still code in C# if that's what you really want to, but I think that for me, Python's kind of a big selling point. It's something that's much easier for me to learn than to get on board with C#. Godot also has visual scripting. It looks kind of like this. I want to be a big fan, but I think I'm going to just do this in Python because it's easier for me to see the code, to see my loops Like, are there loops here? I can figure it out, but if it's in Python, I can just see an indented block of code, and it's much easier for me to see. So I'm not a huge fan of Godot's visual scripting yet. Hopefully, in future versions, this will get cooler and a lot easier to follow and put together. Godot is also the third was it the third? Is it fastest growing or most active? I think it's the most active, third most active product on GitHub at the moment. So the development for this is really going through the roof. These guys are really working on the features and making this thing better all the time. Also, it's tiny. So you go to their download page and check this out. I'll just show you real quick. So godotengine.org. We jump in there, you click download. You pick your flavor of Linux, Mac, or legacy systems, and you click the download button. And you get, basically, you're just going to get one file. So you're going to get, and these are versions that I've gotten over, you see, from June, April, November. So this is the current version. This is the file. You get this one file. Look how tiny this is. I don't even know how that's possible. Now watch this. You click it, and it runs, and you're done. There's no downloading all kind of like cloning a repository, doing makes and compiling the software. You don't even have to install it. You can just run the one file. Done. So it's mine to own. I do have the source code for this if I want it. If I want to, say, actually modify the source code, which I do not, but it's there and I know that I'm not being spied on. They're never going to come after me for any money. The licensing is mine, all mine. However, I can choose to give back to this project. I can contribute to them if I want to help development. And I get to code this all in Python. Yeah, I'm all on this one. Godot is the choice, as long as it can actually work. And we're going to figure that out as we go through these in future videos. Most of the Godot tutorials that I see are based on the two-dimensional, the 2D engine, and 2D physics. I'm going to focus on the 3D stuff because that's what's interesting to me. But we'll get into the weeds of how this thing works in another video. The thing that none of the engines really seem to do is have all kinds of 3D assets. Your 3D assets, and those are the things, right? Who you are, the player, the environment, the terrain, the things that you mess with, the buildings, the way things operate. All those things should be uniquely yours for your game. You shouldn't be... that's why a lot of the games look alike. If you go to the Unity store, you see that however many thousand people have downloaded this exact same set of assets. So all the games kind of look alike. It's okay, but you should develop your own style. What should it look like? And that's really up to you. But how are you going to make those things? How are you going to make all your 3D assets and put your style and your stamp and your flavor on all your game assets if you're not going to get anything from the Unity store? The answer is simple. Blender. To be honest, any 3D creation software like Blender does have a learning curve, but Blender is another bit of free open source software. Blender is just a full suite of all the things that you're going to need. So why do I need this? This is going to be how I build the things that are going to go into Godot or Unreal or Unity. If I make this skeleton or I make a superhero or whatever I'm going to make, and I need to build them here, and you can add textures, and they do what's called UV unwrapping. So that means we're taking a two-dimensional picture, just like a JPEG or a PNG file, and we're going to wrap it around these 3D models to give it that awesome look. So it can be a realistic texture. If that's what your game is going to be, it's going to be photorealistic. You're going to pick photorealistic textures, and you're going to use those that you're going to wrap around your models. And you're going to use really detailed models to represent it well. On the other hand, if you want to do a more stylized version, everything should be hand painted, or you like the World of Warcraft look or something. That's kind of my favorite, and I like that. So you're still going to use textures, and you're still going to wrap those around your model. So you're going to build your model here, and you're going to UV map those PNG files, or those PNG files, or those JPEG files. You're going to wrap those around your models in a specific way, and Blender is going to let you do all of that. when you're done with your model in Blender, it's going to look and act and be exactly like you want. And then we're going to drag that from Blender over into Godot, where we're going to actually bring that thing to life. And that's where we're going to, maybe we take the skeleton, we might in Blender make the walk animation so the skeleton can walk around. But when does he walk? When does he stand still? That's all stuff we're going to do over in Godot. So we're going to do some of the coding here. I shouldn't say coding, there's not really any code usually, but we're going to do all the asset building, most of the animations, but not all. And we're going to do all of the UV unwrapping. So we're going to map how our 2D textures wrap around our 3D models. And let me explain that maybe a different way. If you think of like an orange, if you were to take an orange and cut the peel and do it in such a way that you could lay that orange out completely flat, right? And then you painted or printed onto that orange peel. So that's what that looks like. And then when you put that wrapper around a round object again, it's exactly the way that you want it. That's roughly what we're doing when we say we're UV unwrapping something. So Blender's going to handle all of our 3D asset creation. It's free open source software. You can still contribute to the developers. And Blender's been around for a long time, and it's a really great product. There's a lot of great videos on the internet, especially on YouTube, showing you how to use it, great tutorials. I'll show you some here as we go along as I start to play with this, but there's other people that that's their specialty. They like to instruct you on how to use Blender, and they do a great job. So that's great. Blender is a fantastic solution for creating 3D assets, but how are we going to create 2D assets? So I've got two different programs that I recommend for creating 2D assets. I'm not recommending Photoshop. It's expensive, it's owned by Adobe, enough said. First program I'm going to recommend is GIMP. So this is GIMP. You get a palette of tools over here, and this is of course your main drawing area, and this is just chock full of all kinds of goodness. This thing has so many different tools and filters and things that you can do. It just about blow your mind. You can spend a lot of time learning GIMP. So I've used GIMP for a very long time, and I really like it. There's a lot of things that you can do. GIMP stands for the GNU Image Manipulation Program. So this thing's specialty is it's often compared to Photoshop, that's why I said that, but it's a little bit different than Photoshop. However, you give this thing a photo, and you can do all kinds of neat things with it. Mask bits off and add gradients and drop shadows, and it just there's so many things that there's not enough video in there's not enough time to go into anything. Second program that I'm going to recommend is this one. It is called Krita. Now Krita is another program that's all about manipulating images. I think it's a little bit better suited to if I right click this here, you get a palette of stuff you can do. I've got some crazy, like that was a ginormous airbrush. I can paint things, and it's pretty cool actually. So Krita's kind of come on my radar in the last little bit here. I like it. I've used GIMP for much longer. GIMP is it's been around for a lot longer, so it's a much older program. But Krita's pretty neat. So why am I picking up two of these? Well, a little bit of this matters to me. Which way you are going to build your game. If you want to go with photorealism, then you're going to start with a lot of actual photos of real-world things, real-world textures, and you're going to manipulate those to maybe make them seamless so that they wrap around things perfectly. On the other hand, you might want to use Krita if you're going to hand paint textures. So I'm bringing these two up. Here's what I think. This is an opinion. It's not a hard and fast one. If you're going to use existing photos and you want to manipulate them and change them and tweak them for your game engine, then I would recommend using GIMP, because that's kind of its strong suit. That's what it wants to do. On the other hand, if you want to start from scratch and you're going to hand paint all your textures, you're going to hand draw those. Maybe you've got a tablet and you're going to draw these things and make everything hand painted, and you want that stylized look like World of Warcraft. I actually prefer that to photorealism. So if that's what you're going for, I would recommend Krita, because it's just got all these neat, handy tools, right there, just easy for you to use. The whole palette of different things that you can do, and it also supports layers and layer masking and all sorts of things. It's lots of brushes here. There's lots of things that you can do that are important for creating your own assets, 2D assets. So that is not to say, however, that you can't create your own from scratch assets in GIMP. You can hand paint stuff in GIMP and you can do it. And that is also not to say that you can't take images and manipulate them in Krita, because you can. But if I was going to say the strong suit of GIMP or Krita would be, like I said, GIMP would be more toward editing an existing image, where Krita would be, I think its stronger suit is creating an image from scratch. So play with both, see which one you like. I think that probably Krita has a little bit lower bar to entry. Maybe not by a lot though. If you're not already familiar with the concept of using layers and painting and the different, how masking works and how you're gonna, use the various tools. They're both going to have a little bit of a learning curve involved. Blender's going to have more of a learning curve, but we'll jump into those things when we get a chance to jump into those things. So that's how we're going to make a game. We're going to create our 2D assets, our 2D artwork in GIMP and or Krita, and then we're going to dump those over into Blender, and we're going to make our 3D assets and wrap those 2D assets around our 3D assets and make them pretty. And then we're going to go from Blender and we're going to dump those 3D assets that are now pretty, and we're going to dump those over into the Godot game engine, and we're going to bring our assets to life. Now, there's a chance that I'm not going to get done programming this new video game today, so there's a good chance that a Patreon might be coming in the future. Hopefully you guys will enjoy this content, and I'll show you all the good, the bad, and the ugly about how things are going to work. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to actually get data from, say, GIMP or Krita into Blender, and how to get it, more importantly, from Blender into Godot. So a lot of people scream about how that doesn't work, and it's very hard to get the information from Blender over into Godot. The textures don't come over, or I edit my UVs and they it doesn't seem to, the mapping doesn't update. I'm going to show you exactly how all that stuff works. So stay tuned for the next video. Hopefully you enjoyed some of this content. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a whole lot. There will be some D&D stuff again in the future, but at this point we're going to do some video game development and some 3D asset and 2D asset creation tutorials and videos, and hopefully those are fun. We'll make some fun. You'll see me get probably frustrated with some of these free open source software tools, and then you can point and laugh and leave your comments in the trumpery down below. My name is Brian Carey, reminding you to be a scholar and a barbarian.